Coming up on City Beat, we hit the streets of Sacramento with the officers who track down trouble before it finds you. We show you how detectives and crime scene investigators work together to solve crimes and shape a safer future. And the story of some avenging angels from the Sacramento Police Department who brought justice in the wake of a Christmas tragedy. Hello, I'm Joe Oliver, and welcome to City Beat. Our topic today is police investigations, from special enforcement units to the CSI. We begin with the story of serious legwork aimed at eliminating the signs and reality of gang life and capturing career criminals. It's legwork that takes back your turf from some very bad players.
I took the blast in the face and forehead, and it knocked me back, and I drove into the car. Felt like a 2x4 had hit me in the head.
Street gang violence has literally drawn blood from Sacramento Police Detective Michael Lopez.
And I lucked out that night. I lucked out tremendously. I carry a pellet behind, about 15 in my face, and one behind my eye, and no long-term damages.
Lopez wasn't even a gang investigator then, but now he works gangs for the Sacramento Police Department and as part of the joint city-county gang task force. Today's task force target is a plain little house in what seems to be a quiet South Sacramento neighborhood.
Individuals that are on probation at that address have been involved in a gang drive-by shooting. Well, in a perfect world, everyone will be there. We'll take everyone in custody. And if we find evidence connected to the drive-by shooting, that would be fantastic. And if we have to gain entry through force at this residence, we will do so.
I'm on search and seizure, and they can search the house.
The house is full and people are stashed everywhere, including one in a camper out back.
We got two more. This right here is all gang graffiti. This is the kind of life they live, you know. They'll go ahead and graffiti even their own home. A lot of these guys are in shoplifting clothes and whatnot. This is one reason why they don't wash it. They just pile it up, and then when it's used up, they go and get some more.
But the big discovery for the day also turns up in the garage.
This is methamphetamine. Yeah, this is a quantity that's too big for one person to use.
Okay, good, yeah. They sell drugs that gives them the money to buy their weapons, to buy their automobiles, things like that. Gangs are highly mobile. Gangs use weapons to carry out their crimes.
Two of the people picked up in this probation search are juveniles, 13 and 16 years old. One of them is new to the gang task force.
Daniel, there's a better way to live than this, okay? We're about to put you down as a gangster. I don't know why you're not in school, all right? You are going the wrong way, son, all right?
It turns out Daniel isn't his real name, and that brings another charge to go along with today's drugs and an outstanding warrant that turns up under his real name. For the gang task force, this probation search turned up everything they were looking for and more. Sacramento Police Chief Arturo Venegas Jr. says the department's efforts are helping turn the tide against gangs, and more weapons are coming online.
The courts themselves have given us some really good tools in saying, okay, we can classify geographical area as a gang territory and by court order prohibit members of the gangs from being in a given area. So actually I see that battle for us as we're making some good headway in the solution of some of the gang problems.
Guns, gangs, and violence, a triple threat to our community that the Sacramento Police Department and its community partners are working to surround and contain.
Please open up the door.
CCAT also still we're looking for Garrett Scott during the time.
On another morning, another strike force reports in. Sergeant Daniel Torres runs CCAT, the Career Criminal Apprehension Team. It's another multi-agency unit. It includes the city and county, as well as state agencies and federal organizations like the U.S. Marshal's Office and the FBI. It's literally the long arm of the law, and agency rivalries are set aside.
It's because of their classification as a career criminal. It means they've been at it for a long time. So these folks in this team really bring that expertise of not only knowledge in the investigations, but great experience at cooperation and interaction within the agencies.
There's a parolee at large wanted out of the Bay Area. He's wanted for armed robbery. He's known to carry a weapon and has violence in his history, so weapons in his history. So because of that, we're going to target him, and he'll be probably our first priority.
Detective Torres meets up with parole agent Michelle Cummings, who's part of a team keeping an apartment under surveillance. Their suspect has a girlfriend living here and has been seen around the apartment.
The associates and girlfriends are probably the most important factors to us in apprehending suspects.
The girlfriend sticks to her story. She hasn't seen the suspect. Career criminals have committed at least 2 crimes and are often facing a third strike conviction. That can make them dangerous, but their past often establishes a pattern. This is just one girlfriend of several in this case. A trail of dots CCAT will connect one at a time. CCAT is following more than one case at a time. Other members of the team are looking for the associates of the remaining suspect in the wounding of a teenager in a car-to-car shooting on Highway 50. One search site is an upscale apartment complex on the north side, where associates of the suspect pointed out several cars that could be connected to him.
Last night, I set SWAT up at 53rd to do a surveillance.
Yet another part of CCAT's working the shooting on the south side. They'll spread out near the addresses of the suspect's friends and family. They'll keep their eyes open, and they'll wait. There are 2 arrests in the case already. The suspects tried to ditch their car and walk away in a neighborhood where they clearly stood out. Neighbors called police.
Had it not been for the community, would not have made the arrest immediately like we did.
CCAT members pull over 2 men for questioning. They're in an area of interest, and investigators think one of them resembles the suspect.
See the door panels popped on these?
All this is all loose like this. What have you been putting back there?
The way I bought the car.
Not like a load car, huh?
Hell no.
The search and questioning go on, but investigators find nothing to tie the 2 to the shooting. CCAT moves on. Surveillance stays in place, some of it 24 hours a day. CCAT investigators blanket Sacramento, checking addresses of possible girlfriends and associates of the suspect, even places he may have visited just before or after the shooting. The leads may not pan out today, but Danny Torres is confident.
Oh, absolutely. He'll get caught.
The numbers bear him out. Some weeks, CCAT captures as many as 15 of the suspects it's after. The Sacramento Police Department's gang unit and parolee intervention teams add their captures to that number as well. It all adds up to a formidable strike force of investigators working to keep safe the citizens of Sacramento. Some crimes leave no obvious connection between victim and criminal. This story is one of those. It began at this restaurant. It tells of a robbery turned deadly and the compassionate investigators who solved the crime and helped a devastated family through the darkest holiday season of their lives.
You truly are lost with this kind of tragedy. And there was so much support with the police.
Jason was our firstborn child. We called him the Tank as a baby.
He loved life, laughed, was never down, and even when his friends were down, he would make his friends laugh.
We enjoyed him immensely.
Jason Frost was 22 years old, and the 1996 holiday season was in full swing. Jason Frost was looking ahead. He was engaged to a young woman he'd met through his job at the bread store, and owners there told him he had a future in management.
Jason had a spark of life to him. He was the type of person that you would remember.
But 2 nights before Christmas, the life the Frost family had built, nourished, and cherished suddenly ended.
And realized at a point that it was never going to be the same again.
But you learn to have a whole new existence. It's different than before.
Jason and his crew were closing the restaurant the night of December 23, 1996. It was a routine they all knew, but someone else knew it too. At closing, 5 men burst through a back door. Their leader wore a devil's mask. He pointed a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun at Jason and announced a robbery. Several workers escaped out the front door as Jason told the gunman the cash was already in the safe and he didn't know the combination. The devil shot Jason once as he stood and twice as he lay on the floor.
There were pictures on the front window of Christmas scenes and snowmen and candy canes and all of that. And yet when we responded to the store that night and looked over the counter to a puddle of blood and clothing.
Toni Sal was a homicide detective in 1996. As she investigated the shooting of Jason Frost, she found an immediate problem. Nothing at the scene pointed to a suspect. But by Christmas Eve, the Sacramento Police Department received an early Christmas present.
On the 24th of December, during the early morning hours, we received a tip that a subject suspected that Rick Brewer may have been involved in the first robbery that occurred almost 1 month before the actual shooting of Jason Frost.
Detectives now had a suspect. Rick Brewer was a small-time thug living in Midtown.
It was no coincidence that Rick Brewer was the one who held the shotgun. It was no coincidence that Rick Brewer was the one who wore the devil's mask. He was running the show.
Rick Brewer had been arrested for a variety of crimes over the years. Now that he was connected to the earlier bread store robbery, Toni Sal believed he had become very dangerous.
Something happens to a person who steps over that line and commits murder. They're somehow changed. And I absolutely believe, and I think that history will show you the same, that it's easier to commit the next one.
Sal and the other detectives all felt for the Frost family. That, plus the threat now presented by Rick Brewer, equaled a change in their Christmas plans.
We knew that if Rick Brewer still had some of the instruments of the crime, that we needed to get there quickly. Even though, on a personal level, leaving the family, I have 2 sons, all of my co-workers have children, it was not something that we would have wanted to do, but we felt we owed it to the Frosts, and we owed it to Jason.
Jason Frost fought for his life for 10 days. His parents lived in Yuba City. The rain had begun to fall, and soon their area would be evacuated because of floods. The Frosts were nearly oblivious. They didn't know it, but they'd left that life and were beginning the nightmare journey to another one.
It was almost as if life were, I was swimming in a kind of a pool of a kaleidoscope of colors and sounds, and it just didn't really make sense. I mean, I was functioning on a day-to-day basis, eating meals, sleeping, etc., but life as I had known it had stopped.
The initial feeling that you have is like a hole has been blown right through you. You're walking around with this dead, numb feeling. You're being guided by instinct.
Detectives were able to bring some small relief. Their Christmas search of the apartment shared by Rick Brewer and his girlfriend had turned up a sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun hidden in the back of a chest of drawers. By the time Jason Frost died, ballistics tests had confirmed the shotgun was the murder weapon. The rain continued in early January, and it seemed to wash out a virtual rat's nest of robbery suspects. By the middle of the month, detectives had 4 more young men in custody in connection with the murder and attempted robbery at the bread store. Once legal proceedings began, they dragged on for more than 2 years. But the detectives, prosecutors, and the court looked out for the Frosts.
They'd always, shake our hands and sorry this had to happen, but we're going to do it. We're going to get these guys, and it was uplifting.
The final verdict in the bread store case came down in 2001. 5 years after Jason Frost died. All suspects were convicted, and Rick Brewer is in prison for the rest of his life.
And in this case, it was the combination of the efforts of a lot of people. My fellow detectives, the supervisors involved in the case, the district attorney who prosecuted the case, the judge who oversaw it.
The shooter, who was proven to a jury that he was the person that did it, was convicted of murder in the first degree and is serving life without possibility of parole. I think in this case that was justice.
The Frost have a cabin near Mount Lassen. It's there that they've created a small, quiet memorial for their only son.
That was Jason's favorite place. We have a boulder that we picked out, and we have etched his name as a monument, a tribute. It's peaceful, and it's beautiful, and I know Jason would have liked that.
Life goes on. I'm enjoying teaching. I have occasions when I see students that remind me very much of my son, and that's a good thing.
And the Frosts say they'll remember the officers and detectives of the Sacramento Police Department who saw them through their darkest time.
They would be good friends to us if we would have been able to continue a relationship with them. If it was a whole different issue.
The Frost's daughter, Shauna, has given birth to 2 little girls in the last couple of years. Shauna and those grandchildren have brought some joy back into the Frost family, especially during the holidays. The Sacramento Police Department has about 120 detectives, most of whom work in this building in the major crime section, the robbery, burglary, and property crime section, or the family and sexual abuse unit. There are also non-sworn crime scene investigators. They combine with the strike force we've already seen to form the Office of Investigations. Our next story follows investigators as they work together to identify, track, and apprehend a suspect in a series of crimes.
I saw a big ball of fire going across and I knew that there had been a crash.
January 2nd, 2000, a foggy Sunday morning when good police work, tragedy, and heroism collided with a desperate suspect in the middle of Mack Road. Detective Dale Stanfield had tracked a series of armed robberies in Sacramento since late November 1999.
Based on the MO, the way he was doing these robberies, the description being consistent and the vehicles being consistent, it was quite obvious to me I had the same guy that was now on a series.
As Stanfield pressed his investigation, he found other robberies that matched his suspect both in the city and in the county. And he found what seemed to be a common thread that could lead to an arrest.
I have a good factor in that, even though we don't have any clue who he is, consistently he robs the place using a stolen car, and then he's dumping the stolen car over into Oak Park. The area was subsequently canvassed, which means you go door to door.
Deputy Chief Albert Nahara heads the Sacramento Police Department's Office of Investigation. He says that kind of public contact is the key in many successful investigations.
The human element really is the direct contact between the investigator and any potential witnesses, victims or suspects out there.
Through security tapes, Detective Stanfield had a picture of the suspect. Detectives' door-to-door efforts paid off quickly. Someone put a name to the man in the picture, David Daniels.
Every indication I had was that very heavy abuse of probably rock cocaine, a very bad habit that, whatever reasons, he needed to stay high as much as he could. On the plus side, the way he treated the victims and the people in the stores was not abusive, wasn't physically abusive, it wasn't meant to terrorize people.
Then, around the middle of December, David Daniels left the city of Sacramento. Stanfield used his contacts and communications web to track Daniels as he began hitting businesses in the county and then left the area.
So I send out what are called interstate bolos or teletypes that actually can send out to highway groups, go up 99 or 50, 80 corridor, and it hits all of the law enforcement agencies in those areas. Those teletypes started generating responses to me from all of these other agencies from as far south as Fresno.
But as Stanfield followed Daniels' trail of crime down the valley, something suddenly changed. In Manteca, Daniels got into a high-speed chase with police, shooting at them as he fled. Violence was now part of the David Daniels case. Against the backdrop of the Y2K crisis that never came, David Daniels came back to Sacramento. Investigators were waiting.
We had information he was going to be at this particular motel in the south area. We also had detectives set up at a friend of his house, also in the south area, and as luck would have it, he did show up at the house.
Before dawn on January 2nd, Daniels spotted police and left his friend's home in a rush. Detectives followed at a distance. They knew Daniels' violence had escalated another notch. He had killed a Sacramento drug dealer in an apparent ripoff a couple of days earlier. As police trailed him, David Daniels raced toward Mack Road at high speed in heavy fog. What was about to happen would involve dozens of officers and investigators, including Sergeant Steve Weinrich and CSI Scott Williams.
We look at a crime scene similar to a play. The stage being the crime scene, the evidence being the props that the actors would have used in the crime scene, and then the actors themselves, the suspects, the victims.
This stage was a foggy, dark roadway. The investigators had learned a lot about David Daniels and what he might do, but it would be Sergeant Steve Weinrich who became the final member of the thin blue line between Daniels and the rest of Sacramento.
And just as I had got straightened out going eastbound on Mack Road, I saw a big ball of fire going across, and I knew that there had been a crash.
In the dark and fog, David Daniels ran a red light and slammed full speed into the back of a car driven by 24-year-old LaTonya McCoy. Her car erupted in flames. Daniels' stolen Camaro had jumped the median, spun 180 degrees, and was now facing oncoming traffic. After the scene was evaluated, Sergeant Weinrich was one of those who approached.
We came up with a plan and approached the car with some ballistic shields, and we were all wearing our vests. Once we got around inside the door, we were trying to look to see if he was actually trapped or not. And it was actually so dark that I couldn't tell, and I told the guy in front of me that I was going to grab his hand. I stepped around the bunker, exposing my body to him, and was keeping my gun back tactically so I wasn't handing my gun to him, and started to reach into the vehicle so that I could grab him. And that's when I saw him do this sudden jerk to the left, and I just had that instinct that I was getting shot, and I could remember feeling the muzzle blast on my face. And just self-preservation, I began to fire back.
The foggy curtain lifted on the stage of a tragedy. LaTonya McCoy was dead. Sergeant Steve Weinrich shot in the leg and the chest. David Daniels shot multiple times.
The tough thing about the Daniels scene, aside from the fact that there was shooting between officers and a suspect that we had to keep track of, there was a car crash, there was quite a few elements in over quite a large area. We had a woman who had burned to death in a car at the location, and we had an officer who had been shot. And this was something that we had in our minds the entire time that we were processing the scene.
But this case includes what some consider a miracle. The bullet that struck Sergeant Weinrich's chest was fired at such close range it went right through his SWAT-grade bulletproof vest. Then it met his badge number 7, and it stopped.
I'm not sure that I do anything different, going to work or when I get home. I think maybe a minor change would be is that you probably appreciate what you have or what you've done a little more so, just having that reminder, maybe the badge.
Detective Dale Stanfield's contacts with law enforcement agencies in the county and up and down the valley show the type of teamwork the Sacramento Police Department can call on to protect its citizens. But in the darkness and fog, the final act in this case was man to man. And Sergeant Steve Weinrich is still standing. The Sacramento Police Department's Office of Investigations reaches out into the community in many kinds of cases, but another unit has a daily impact on Sacramento neighborhoods. They're the officers of the Problem-Oriented Policing, or POP teams. They take on concerns in partnership with neighborhood associations and individual citizens. The Gardenland Northgate Neighborhood Association wrote a letter of thanks to its POP team, and they share their story on this next segment we call Above and Beyond.
On behalf of the Gardenland Northgate Neighborhood Association, we would like to recognize our POP officers, Don Gilbertson, Mike Blessing, Michelle Trump, and Chris Piazza.
We could always count on the 4 officers to be involved in anything that was going on in the Gardenland community. Every time I seen Officer Gilbertson and I would mention something to him that was going around in our neighborhood, he would always make it a priority to make sure it was gotten taken care of.
One of the problems that we had and was taken care of recently was the establishment right behind me. It was a bar that drew in a lot of bad elements there. Over the years, the problem has been eliminated with the help of our POP officers.
Gil and Joe, your support is what makes our job possible out here. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chris, thank you.
This program is focused on the Sacramento Police Department's Office of Investigation. Detectives and crime scene investigators join forces with neighborhood and patrol officers on the front lines of the battle to contain criminals trying to expand their turf by taking away yours. Investigators combine modern technology with time-tested techniques of investigation and years of experience. As you've seen, members of the Office of Investigation and the rest of the Sacramento Police Department bring something else to the fight: courage and compassion. For City Beat, I'm Joe Oliver. Thanks for joining us.